We're going to start today's session with a conversation with Dawes, co-founder at Modded Heroes. Sean, welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you?
Good. So Sean, let's start by introducing our audience to you. Tell us about you, your business, and what are you doing?
Sure. So Modded Heroes is kind of a short version for modified, Euros being European cars. So what we do is we're an aftermarket performance parts online retailer. We sell performance and styling parts for European vehicles such as Audi, BMW, and Volkswagen. 100% online retail. We have a warehouse and offices here in Pennsylvania and the United States, and we ship to customers all over the United States.
And when did you start this company? How did you get it started? And why did you choose this particular domain?
Yeah, so myself and I have two other co-founders in the company. We actually worked about 6 years ago now, I think it's been. We worked for another online automotive retailer, Turn 5, which is a holding company of AmericanMuscle.com, ExtremeTerrain.com, as well as American Trucks. They're a Inc. Top 500 online retailer, pretty much selling aftermarket performance parts and styling parts, but for domestic vehicles. So Ford Mustangs, the Jeep market, as well as some of the American truck models such as Chevy and Ford, the Ford F-150s. So myself and my two co-founders, Jim and Nate, we handled all their customer acquisition, or at least their online customer acquisition. So that's paid search, SEO, as well as paid social. So at the time, Facebook, Instagram was kind of not really taken off just yet, but all the Facebook PPC, retargeting, everything around that is what we handled. And we decided to quit our jobs a number of years ago and kind of launch into a similar vertical that we didn't have a non-compete with. Kind of the mentality behind that was we did take some time, probably about a year and a half to figure out what we wanted to do. So in that time we consulted. We did, online marketing, so paid search, social, paid advertising, as well as SEO for a handful of online retailers and some service-based businesses as we were kind of figuring out what vertical we wanted to enter, or what domain rather. And for us, we looked at everything, anything from baby products through sporting goods through, and then we eventually came back to automotive. And part of the reason why we liked automotive is we're familiar with it. So if we ever did need to secure any kind of third-party funding outside of traditional financing, it's much easier to secure financing in that type of avenue, already having prior experience and especially working for a company that is very well known in the industry. And two, it's really a good market for the life cycle. A lot of markets, you acquire a customer and they kind of go away. So for example, if you look at the baby product market, a baby's a baby for only a few months and then they become a toddler and, then a young kid. So you either need to make a lot of money very quickly and, that consumer being the parent would have to have more children in order for you to drive up your lifetime value for that customer, or you would just need to constantly be acquiring new customers at a decent CPA. So for us, the great thing about automotive is catering to vehicles that are in various price points is, you'll have someone who, say, is 17 years old here in the United States, gets a driver's license, and they get a car for a few $1,000s because that's all they can afford, and they'll buy products for that car, and eventually they sell that car, and then they'll buy another car, and they do it all over again. So the life cycle, if you acquire a customer and keep them happy, can actually go over a long period of time with them as they pretty much rinse and repeat the whole purchase cycle over and over again.
Very good analysis. So talk a little bit about how you got your company off the ground and got to your first million. What were the key drivers, key moves, and how did you get there?
So for anyone, outside of, we're self-funded. So, from day one, it's not like we started with an idea, then went over to someone and says, hey, give us a whole stack of cash and let's get this going. One of the key strategies for us was when we quit our job is being able to pay yourself, right? Obviously, unless you're funded, you need to stay alive until that business turns profitable. And for us, the easiest way to do that was to start another business. So we actually started a consulting business because there's no overhead, right? All you need is your time and to be able to acquire customers, at least clients in this case, and pay yourselves enough money and then also give you enough cash to play with to start your actual business. So for us, it was kind of a twofold process. We said, let's start a consulting company, generate enough revenue that it was just paying ourselves, a decent amount of money, but not enough where it was taking away too much time for us to actually work towards our actual goal, which was to start an e-commerce business and then move away from the consulting business. So that was kind of one of the key strategies for us in order to kind of survive until you got to that MVP. So we picked up a handful of consulting clients, and then we kind of started the store. We did it very cheaply. We did it on out-of-the-box software. There's Shopify, BigCommerce, all these stores that are out nowadays. So you can do it pretty cheaply. And then we just kept going back to what our strengths were, which was marketing from PPC and organic side of search. So what we did was, we kind of were able to test the waters with PPC, and then once we started generating enough sales, we knew that we had a viable product, and that's when we started actually putting some money towards it out of our own pocket to actually build our own platform, which is the basis of what it is today. And then as the company grew and we felt comfortable enough to actually start siphoning money out of the business to actually start, payroll and stuff like that back in the day, we just slowly started hiring our clients. So it's like as one business was rising, we started pulling back on the other business. So it's a good way of kind of protecting the downside and removing as much risk for us.
How long did it take you to get to $1 million?
We easily hit $1 million in year one.
In year one, okay.
Yeah.
And
year one. That's the other thing is I think
inventory financing in the kind of business that you have chosen to be in. There's an inventory cost. How did you manage that?
Yeah, so pretty much like any e-commerce business, especially now, it's kind of on the rise, or at least it's more popular in the general public's eyes. Drop shipping is the way to go. Drop shipping, for those who don't know what drop shipping is, it's basically when an order is placed with us, we then in return place the order with the manufacturer or sometimes a wholesale distributor, and they ship the order right to the customer. So you're actually never floating any money outside of the time it takes for you to get the funds into your bank account from whether it be credit card processing or whatever payment gateway you use, PayPal. But that's what we leverage, 100% drop shipping right off the gate, right out of the bat. That was the easiest way to kind of not need capital for inventory. On a retail model, obviously if you're a new business trying to resell someone else's products, your margins are going to be very, very thin. You could have, say, 15% margins before shipping out the door on stuff that you are reselling, like a third party. So one of the keys for us was just making sure that our customer acquisition costs were okay and we weren't necessarily bleeding money. On some brands, we knew we were going to lose money, so you kind of have to eat that and kind of blend it in with the rest of the margins that you're going to get, because ultimately you're striving to get to the typical resale margins, which, are usually 30, you can see as high as 50 points, but usually you're in the 30 to 40 points before shipping costs out the door. So we were very aggressive with customer acquisition and just keeping our eye on the bottom line cost out the door. So we didn't really have to risk too much money. It was just staying on top of the financials to make sure that we weren't going to either we were going to break even early on so with customer acquisition, kind of get the growth rates that we needed, and we also lose too much money. Does that make sense?
To get the business going and so forth, did you change your strategy with the inventory? Did you start taking inventory, or did you keep going with the same drop ship model?
Yeah, so as with any online retailer, even your big box retailers still do drop ship. So depending on the marketplace, you have what's considered high velocity and low velocity. So anything, obviously, for us that once we started doing volume, we started seeing high velocity, we started to inventory that. So, the benefit of inventorying it is a couple things. One is free to the customer, because a lot of your wholesale distributors or manufacturers take a bit of time for them to ship a product. And, in the age of Amazon, everyone who orders something today wants it yesterday. So that's the battle that you have. And being a new business in, let's say, even today's marketplace, it's extremely brutal for people to come into the marketplace and not be able to get products shipped to the customer as fast as possible. So what we did was we just analyzed what our high velocity items were, and we started bringing those in-house at whatever quantities we could early on. And eventually, like with any retail or even online retail business, you start negotiating terms, right? So you get your net 15 to start or net 30, and then you work towards net 45, where you're only paying for the goods, 30 days either after they're sold, or some companies do, that month's net 30. So, June's orders you do by the end of August, or July rather, and vice versa. So it was really just kind of ramping up from there and looking at,
Sean, Can you adjust your microphone? The audio is a little bit distorted. So something is happening maybe in the position of your microphone.
Is that better?
Well, go ahead and speak and we'll see.
Sure. What I was saying is basically looking at the high velocity items, and you would warehouse those items, whereas you would still drop ship your low velocity items.
And that's where you brought in some inventory financing.
Correct. And a lot of times you can leverage your vendors for that actual financing by negotiating that term.
How much of this have you done with negotiating with vendors and terms versus actually working with lenders who finance inventory?
Are you talking about today? Probably today, at least 60% of our inventory are vendors finance easily.
Vendor finance, okay.
Yeah.
And when,
like I said,
so if you look at the trajectory of your growth, what are the inflection points where you became eligible to be able to negotiate with vendors for terms? Or an inflection point where you became eligible to be able to negotiate good outside financing to take, to finance your inventory?
Sure. I think you start after doing, velocity. I mean, no one ultimately cares about you until you start doing some numbers, right? You have to start moving units before anyone actually pays attention to you. You can't start a business and expect someone to give you everything. It's a very give and take, especially in the reseller type of community, because there's only so much that they're willing to give you in terms of margin, and there's only so much you can do in order to sell the product, right? You have marketing costs, you have shipping costs, and things of that nature. So you have to approach it from not only a reseller side, but you have to look at it, what if you're on the other side of the picture and you're a manufacturer, what are things of interest to you? And that's what you need to leverage. And, once you start doing velocity, people start listening because obviously what you're doing is working. So you have to approach it from, you start with the brands that you're moving volume with, you negotiate those types of deals, and then oftentimes you can take those deals and then go back to other brands in your catalog and say, well, it's working for us over here, how about we try it for you, even though we're not the largest retailer for you. And oftentimes they'll listen, especially if you're doing, any type of business with them rather. And then ultimately you'll get to the point where brands approach you to get into your catalog, right? You're gaining market share, you have impressions. Whether you move product or not, they just want to get into your catalog just because of the eyeballs that you are getting. And at that point, you're in a position where you can say, these are my requirements. Whereas before, when you're early on starting a business, you'll sell anything, right? Ultimately, you're just trying to stay alive, you're trying to get revenue. But when you get to a position where you have control of either the marketplace or you have a decent control of the market share, in terms of impressions at least, you can start setting your terms, meaning these are the margins I require net terms, I require, for us, it's shipping speed. We need people to ship our orders. If they are going to be drop shipped, they have to be shipped within a very fast period of time, and you hold people accountable. But in return, you're going to, say, well, if you do all these things and we bring you on, these are all the things that we're going to do for you. So you have to approach it from both sides of the picture and always put yourself in the perspective of, if I was a manufacturer, how would this sound to me? Yep.
And how does your merchandising strategy flow from all this? I'm sure you've said a lot of things which point to, search volumes driving merchandising strategy,
sure.
Velocity of what's selling drives merchandising strategy. What have been the thinking behind your merchandising strategy?
Sure. So, this can kind of apply to everyone outside of even automotive, since we're automotive. But one of the strategies obviously is filling product gaps. So for us, for example, let's say, and I'm going to simplify this just for the sake of the audience, say we didn't sell wheels, right? And we were just selling performance products. But we say, well, our customers also buy wheels. Why aren't we selling wheels? So then you start looking for manufacturers that sell wheels, and you obviously look for them at an attractive margin. The same goes on a very granular level, which is what we actually do. We look very specific product categories. That's a very simplified example. But for example, our vehicles are around year, make, and model. So we start identifying and saying, what's a large number of customers that are either inputting vehicles into our database looking for products, and then what are we not actually offering? It could be a specific year or year range that we have really a very poor selection on. So then you start going after that. Another strategy, obviously, is margin, right? You have to make money. You're not in the business to lose money or break even. So margin comes into play. A lot of times you'll have more than one brand for the same type of product. So you need to make sure that by bringing on a brand, you're not cannibalizing the sales of another brand. So, for example, let's say we sell a product and we're making 40 points on. Well, this new brand comes on that we want to sign on, and we're going to, let's say, get half of that, 20 points. Well, why would I want to sell that? Am I going to do volume? Because if I can justify it on a volume basis, I can justify it from a bottom line standpoint. But if it's not necessarily going to do volume and offset my net, then why would I do it? Because I'm just going to cannibalize sales from one brand to another and actually lose money. So it really depends on your strategy. It could be speed. I might want to get rid of a brand that's too slow or they can't fulfill our inventory, something like that, to speed up. And that's a customer experience kind of merchandising strategy. It's not always just about, one thing or the other, whether it be price or filling a product gap. It's kind of an overall picture you have to take for merchandising.
Very interesting. You have bootstrapped the business. Even though you said that early on in your choice of verticals, you factored in the idea of maybe at some point raising financing, but you didn't raise financing. Sure. What has been the thinking vis-a-vis financing strategy within the company?
I'm a big believer in what I like to refer to as being hungry. I think oftentimes companies go down the path of raising money for a few reasons. One is what I refer to as like throwing a Hail Mary. They get to the point where they're like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I need cash. And they go after that, and they bring on a poor partner. They go after it from just pure money aspect, and they bring on partners that ultimately cause too many problems with the business. We see this with a lot of actually brands in our industry that just make poor decisions. They go to private equity, and actually the customer base kind of backfires on them. And we actually see this with one of the larger competitors that we do have that's private equity owned and is actually experiencing some troubles right now. I think it's a control aspect. I think it's also a good strategy because, a company that's lean is also actually more dangerous, right? Because, if you just throw money at something, eventually you're going to have to make that money back. So a private equity company, can dump as much money as they want, but if they can't make it back, they're in a bad position. Whereas if you're running lean and you can scale on a lean model, that's very dangerous to someone who's dumping too much cash into a business.
Totally agree. It's very much in
it's
line with our philosophy here.
Yeah, it's like a lot of times people make decisions on short-term revenue, whereas I like to make decisions based on long-term revenue, and I think that's a better long-term revenue decision. Now, obviously, if you need financing for something on a large scale, that's a different decision. But I'm speaking from this marketplace, and you'll see actually a lot of these larger automotive e-commerce stores have never received any funding. Our prior employer never received outside cash, just traditional financing.
Right. Now, in the strategy of running lean, what role has a virtual company structure played for you? Could you describe actually the structure of your team and how you've recruited, where you've recruited, and how you've kept things lean?
Yeah, sure. So from a recruiting standpoint, ultimately, I don't necessarily care where anybody is in the world. Obviously, for certain tasks, like working in the warehouse, they have to actually be physically here. But as far as you have graphic design, you have web design, and things of that nature, we utilize people from all over the world. And not necessarily, I'm not talking about going on freelancer websites and just hiring people like that.
Adjust your microphone once more, please.
Sure. I'm not referring to doing things of the nature like freelancer or Elance or stuff like that, to do web development. But, we have our web developers are not in the United States. They're in Europe. And, a language barrier to me doesn't matter. Location doesn't matter. We just ultimately need to recruit the best talent. And for us, that's always been the thing. Because, I'm a big advocate of self-managing. And if someone can't self-manage themselves, then it's just micromanaging, and I think micromanaging is useless because it wastes my time and it wastes the person that I'm hiring's time. You should ultimately hire people who are very intelligent and more intelligent than you in the areas that you're hiring for. I think from a management standpoint, you have to have a general idea of what needs to be done. So you should have some general idea of how to do each job. That makes you more effective at hiring for that position, but ultimately you need to hire people who are smarter than you and can just take something and run with it. And oftentimes by restricting your workforce to a 10-mile radius around where your physical office is, I think that runs into a problem.
What is the size of your team today?
We're over a dozen employees, so we keep it lean.
And so the remote, what percentage is remote and what percentage is, how many are remote, how many are virtual, how many are on location?
About, 25% remote? Yeah.
25% remote, okay.
Yeah.
And so this is my final question, and let's spend a little bit of time brainstorming about this topic, because this is what applies to all the entrepreneurs who are thinking of starting small e-commerce companies today. How does a small e-commerce merchant compete with Amazon in this day and age? What is your advice for new entrepreneurs in the category?
Sure. I'm going to speak from the automotive, but there's also, this applies to pretty much many of the verticals. I think a lot of, if you're in, let's say, a resale, right? So there's a couple different models. You can either resell someone's stuff, or you can actually private label manufacture, which would be, taking a product, manufacturing it, either manufacturing under your own name or under another label. Most manufacturers are actually not interested in being sold on Amazon. If you actually look at a lot of their policies that are in place nowadays and coming out, most of them have what's considered a do not sell list, which Amazon and eBay are generally actually on that list. The reason being is most manufacturers are realizing that it's not a long-term strategy to have something get diluted on Amazon. So Amazon really isn't a concern to me. We don't even look at it really, to be honest with you, and most retailers don't as far as these niche businesses. If you're going to try to start in some other verticals, that might be a challenge. If you're going to sell televisions or try to sell something like that, good luck. But in a lot of these niche businesses, Amazon won't be able to compete on the things that actually matter, which is customer service, because a lot of these type of markets require extreme amounts of knowledge, and Amazon has successfully actually built a massive business on very little customer service around the area of one-on-one interactions, whether it be through phone calls, live chat, actual marketing initiatives, no social. It's quite impressive, but that's why I think some of these niche businesses are actually able to survive in the age of Amazon, is for that reason. So, how to kind of successfully build a business in today's age with Amazon, I think it's, one, you have to pick the right market. You have to analyze it from a few different points. For us, it needs to have an average order value of a decent size, because if you're reselling, you have to apply the reselling margin, and that'll apply also what you can afford for a customer acquisition cost. At the end of the day, it just boils down to math. What's your customer acquisition cost? What's your targeted average order value based on your margin? And that'll determine what that order's profitability is. And then you have to look at a market size and say, is it big enough? And if it's big enough, who are the players? Are we able to take a percentage of that? And, is it viable? You can't necessarily pick a market that's extremely small and expect to be profitable and survive. It's just not going to work. So you have to really approach it from a few different angles.
So, my take on this topic is partly what you said, yes, that you have to pick a category where Amazon is not going to play, and the information-rich categories that people have a lot of questions about and that require one-on-one customer service is a very good filter to put on what category you choose to go into. Another category another filter to put in is, categories where people want immediate delivery are not good categories to compete with Amazon in, right? Because that is one of their great customer service sweet spots is, immediate delivery, Prime, and I mean, they're offering incredible delivery terms these days. And if that matters in your niche, that's probably not something that you're going to be able to compete with Amazon in. So your customer base needs to be willing to trade off that one-on-one customer support, rich, high-touch customer support, with the idea of the fact that you may take a bit longer to deliver, because I don't think the third-party logistics providers have yet gotten to a point where everybody is offering, the same kind of delivery terms as Amazon is offering. I think they will get there. There's a lot of pressure on the third-party logistics providers to match Amazon's level of delivery services, right?
Well, I mean, I'd actually kind of debate that because, even in our market, like I said, people want to order it today and have it yesterday. So, we have numerous customers. They'll place an order, and within 30 minutes, they're asking for tracking information. So, you really can't get away unless you're building something custom. The customer base in the United States is very, very eager to get their products, and in a polite way. Whereas I think internationally, international customers tend to be willing to wait a little bit longer, actually.
So what is your experience in terms of delivery? Well, how are you doing that? Are you working with third-party logistics providers who are able to do what you need?
No, so we don't use 3PLs. We use our own warehouse, and then we also, like I said, a percentage of our orders do get drop shipped, which is common across every single competitor in this space, because some of these products are low velocity. It's really working with those manufacturers because you have less control in getting these items out the door very quickly. It's a constant battle. It really is.
Well, I mean, you may not have to use 3PLs, but the manufacturers will have to use 3PLs. So if you have to meet those...
No, they actually don't. A lot of them don't use 3PLs.
So how do they deliver?
Through their own warehousing. Yeah, the issue with 3PLs...
They have enough coverage to be able to deliver within 1 or 2 days with their own service?
No, it won't deliver. Yeah, no, it won't deliver within 1 to 2, but it'll ship out within 24 hours. And ultimately, that's what the customer wants. They want tracking information. They want to know they placed the order and they're getting tracking information very, very fast.
So that's doable.
Yeah.
That's doable.
Yeah.
That's doable. Right. But the Amazon customer base
think it's doable,
is
but
looking
it's not.
for shipment completed, fulfillment completed within 2 days or 3 days, and that's creating a lot of pressure on the.
Yeah. In some of these markets, it'll never happen because if you look at it from just a pure math standpoint, I mean, if you have low velocity, there's no way you can really achieve a next day delivery on low velocity. You'd have to your holding costs and your churn on those items would eat you alive on a reselling margin.
Well, yes and no, because if the third-party logistics providers standardize on those kinds of delivery terms, then you would be able to deliver by using somebody else's network and still be able to meet those terms. I think that change is still in the process. That change has not come fully kicked in gear.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Right. All right. Well, Sean, very interesting. Would you like to provide any guidance on how far along are you by way of, revenues or whatever you're comfortable with?
We can't close revenue. There's so many people who would want to know what our revenue is, but I mean, we're definitely in the 7 figures per employee easily. So.
All right. Excellent. Well, congratulations, and we'll keep in touch and track your progress.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Sure.